My name is Renee. You're listening to Detours in Archaeology, Part 2 of Osiris and Isis, Love Never Dies. Whether you're a regular listener or you're joining us for the first time during this podcastathon, we're delighted to have you here. Usually, we spend our time exploring ancient ruins and looking at art. They say history is a map of where we've been, while mythology tells the story of who we want to become. But today, we aren't just looking back, we're turning that inspiration into action for a larger purpose. As part of a special podcastathon, and I chose to support UNICEF. At least when I was a kid, I remember having those little boxes for Halloween that, while getting candy, you could also get some coins. I did look up what UNICEF actually stands for, which is crazy that I never did that before. And while I knew it was, a humanitarian aid to help kids, it does so much more than I thought. I mean, not only does it impact children's education and health and protection, but also engages with climate change and emergency response. It does its work in every area of the world. Since this is an education podcast about history, because I want to share knowledge and share stories, that I thought that building education for children and getting them interested in history would be a great connection to at least part of what UNICEF does. So that's why I chose it. To quickly provide a synopsis and to keep us moving along, let's dive into some of this.
Picking back up with her multiple mythological roles,
Isis, in general, is a central figure in mythology whose rules evolve from a devoted protector of her family into a universal all-goddess worshipped across the Mediterranean. In later times, she became known by names such as Myrianimos, meaning myriad named, or Aset M. Remis Nebu, meaning Isis in all her names. These titles reflected her nature as an all-encompassing goddess who embodied many aspects of other deities, including Aphrodite, Hera, Athena, Artemis, and Astarte, playing into syncretism. She was revered as the ruler of both nature and fate, celebrated as the Lady of the Mouths and Rivers, and was believed to control the annual flooding of the Nile, as well as summoning winds, thunder, and lightning. Isis was also regarded as a source of law and civilization. She was credited with discovering the principles of wet and dry, establishing religious laws, specifically 15 commandments or thesmoi, and promoting gender equality by empowering women to stand equal to men. Her greatest power lay in her mastery of magic, which enabled her to protect her husband, Osiris, strengthen her son, Horus, and command spirits as loyal subjects. But how were they shown in art? As I said in the last episode, the earliest known depictions of Osiris and Isis date to around 2300 BCE in the Old Kingdom 5th dynasty. Initially, Osiris was portrayed as a local fertility and agricultural deity. His earliest symbols, the crook, like the shepherd's staff, and the flail, a farming implement, are designed to have come from a pre-dynastic ruler or shepherd god named Enjeti. By the end of the 5th dynasty, he was commonly shown as a mummified figure with crossed arms over his chest, right over left, symbolizing his royal role in resurrection and linking him to rebirth and the afterlife. During the New Kingdom, Osiris's iconic image was firmly established and became standard in tombs and temples. Artists often depict him with either blue skin, symbolizing his death, or green skin, symbolizing new growth and renewal, or black, representing the Nile's fertile silt. His distinctive headpiece, the Atef crown, tall white canonical crown of Upper Egypt and flanked by 2 ostrich feathers, became a symbol of his divine authority, embodying truth and divine power. In later periods, as Osiris was incorporated with other gods, his image evolved to reflect his broader powers. During the New Kingdom and the late and Ptolemaic periods, he was fused with gods like Ta and Sokar, depicted as a small figurine, either standing mummy with a prominent plume crown, or as a falcon or hawk-headed figure symbolizing the creator, the god of burial and rebirth. Images would show him holding the royal regalia, the wa scepter, the flail, and the crook, likely the connection to Osiris, along with the Atef crown. Ta Sokar Osiris usually stands on a funerary mound, possibly the primeval mound, and, showing him as a full human, wears a sun disk, cow horns, and regal cobras. He is also depicted as a pygmy with a scarab beetle on his head, symbolizing Khepri, the male version of Khepri after being resurrected. These representations of Ta Sokar Osiris could have inspired the deity Ta Patek that Herodotus called Patekos. Osiris was also linked to the moon, representing its cyclical phases, with iconography featuring a lunar disk and a crescent crown symbolizing death and resurrection cycles. In ancient Egyptian funerary texts like the Book of the Dead, Osiris is central to the soul's journey. The imagery associated with Osiris is highly standardized and symbolic. The scene typically shows Osiris seated on a throne in the Hall of Two Truths. He appears mummified, with bluish-green, green, or black skin, and holds the symbols of kingship, the crook and flail. Nearby, the heart of the deceased is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. While Anubis oversees the weighing of the scales, Osiris is the ultimate judge of the soul's fate. Above or around him, 4 small figures called the 4 sons of Horus are standing on a lotus flower, representing the protection of the internal organs. Another thing that you can learn more about by listening to the Harrower episode. The creature called a Mut is also there, and if the heart weighs heavier than the feather, it's devoured. And the soul is either condemned or just ceases to exist, or it's condemned by ceasing to exist. If the heart is lighter or equal in weight, Thoth records the positive result and the soul moves on to Osiris for judgment. So we can still say no. Art and beliefs influenced each other. Images of Osiris and related gods helped promote beliefs in eternal life. Symbols were used flexibly, allowing different interpretations without altering images. In mythological scenes and symbolic representations, Isis and Osiris myths highlight stories such as Horus's conception, which depicted Osiris as a phallus symbol with a bird overhead, used from Seti I to the Greco-Roman Dendra. The rare act of Osiris and Isis's union, with Osiris on a funerary bed and Isis as a bird of prey, appears in only 3 dynastic images. Osiris's resurrection, shown with Isis and Nephthys beneath solar boats, symbolizes the afterlife and sky worlds, depicted in Seti I's tomb and in others. Scenes depicting Osiris, protected by Isis and Nephthys, underscored their roles through repeated imagery. The broader narrative includes Osiris's murder by Set, Horus's birth, and their conflict, with Osiris as the underworld king, Horus with a double crown, and Isis as a protector, with kings offering gifts. A change in identifying the bird over Osiris's private part occurred in ancient scenes. In Abydos, in the Ta Sokar chapel, as Isis depicted as a kite. About 1300 years later in Dendra, its meaning shifted. Originally, the birds above Osiris, those for Isis and Horus, were called falcons. Later, the bird over Osiris's private part was shown as a vulture, representing Nekhbet, or as the Falcon of Gold, a title of Horus. This evolution indicates the bird once symbolized Isis, but later also represented Nekhbet or Horus, or possibly the Ba bird of Osiris when viewed as Horus, with these meanings emerging from the Ramesside period, so 19th dynasty to Greco-Roman times. Most information comes from sites like Abydos and Dendra, which may bias understanding due to their significance and preserved artifacts. Few images show Osiris and Isis actually together, only 3 from the entire dynastic period, probably because such scenes were rare or just didn't survive. Myths were mainly shared through rituals rather than images or text. Ancient Egyptian artists used symbols for gods, leading to diverse styles over time. Bronze Osiris statues gained popularity from the 26th dynasty, depicting both mummy-like and youthful forms, symbolizing his connection with the moon. The Osirian Koyak festival evolved from what it was in the Middle Kingdom into a lively celebration with temple carvings by Ramses II showing priests performing rituals, entering dark rooms, and emerging onto temple roofs with god statues, symbolizing unity with the sun disk. The festival conveyed a dual message, entering darkness and emerging into light. Ceremonies honoring Osiris's death and rebirth included raising a jet pillar and making grain-filled Osiris mummies. The symbols held deep religious meaning, focusing on resurrection and eternal life, core to Egyptian beliefs. The story of Horus born from Osiris was depicted at Abydos, vital to funerary practices, appearing in many cemeteries from the New Kingdom, highlighting their cultural importance. The myth shaped 2 ideas: Horus as the earthly king and Osiris's rebirth as underworld ruler. Artwork shows kings like Sethos I, with Horus and Osiris reinforce the divine connection of the pharaohs, using symbols like the double crown, the Atef crown, the Waz scepter, and the Ankh for protection, authority, and order. Scenes of Osiris's resurrection and solar boats symbolize the journey into the afterlife, seen in the royal tombs of Ramses VI, IX, Sheshuk III, and private graves like Batirdis's in Thebes shared across society. Scenes depict social differences. Osiris rising or sailing in the solar bark appear in royal and some private tombs, indicating symbols became more accessible over time, and some images include hidden scripts alongside hieroglyphs, suggesting that they are intended for initiated audiences. During the Greco-Roman period, Osiris festivals and art evolved as Greek and Roman mystery religions influenced Egyptian traditions, leading to more somber and mystical themes from the Hellenistic period onward. In the Ramesside period, festivals could be huge and take place going all around the city, but were still focused on the ritual. Rituals became theatrical performances based on Osiris's and Dionysus Zagreus' deaths. The festival emphasized dualism, symbolizing a spiritual journey from darkness to light, representing the soul's passage from the underworld to Elysium or the Egyptian fields of Ayaru. During this time, the balance between solar and lunar worship shifted, with an increased focus on the Osirian cult, especially concerning moon phases. Small bronze statues depict Osiris as a young figure or wrapped in bandages, likely due to the advancements in metalworking along with the new religious ideas. And that's the big question. How are they syncretized? Which we've already covered a little. For local gods, as the worship of Osiris grew in ancient Egypt, he began to incorporate the roles of older, regionally revered gods. One of these was Khenti Ametiu, a wolf deity associated with the city of Abydos, whose name means foremost of the Westerners. Osiris adopted this title, symbolizing his position as the chief god of the dead.
Because the sun is where the sun sets, and therefore the entrance to the underworld or the land of the dead.
Another was Adjeti, a shepherd god from Osiris, whose symbols, such as the crook and flail, were absorbed into Osiris's own imagery.
The name, which derives from the Egyptian PRSJR, House of Osiris, could be pronounced Busiris, similar to Osiris because of the name's meaning, or sometimes it's pronounced as Busiris based on the Arabic name for the site, Abu Sir.
These adaptations reflected how Osiris came to represent not just resurrection, but also local traditions and identities. The Ta-Soka-Osiris triad started in the city of Memphis. These three gods were merged into a single powerful figure to symbolize the entire cycle of life, death, and rebirth.
As I discussed earlier, these gods were Ta, the creator god representing beginnings, Sokar, who provided over the underworld, fourth and fifth hours, and death, and Osiris, the god of resurrection and the future. This combination was frequently depicted in funerary art, especially in wooden statues that held scrolls, helping the deceased navigate the afterlife. The unification of these deities reflected the Egyptians' desire for continuity and hope beyond death. Egyptians also linked their sun god Ra with Osiris through a process called solar synchronization. According to their beliefs, the two gods would meet in the underworld at night and unite to form a single soul, or united Ba. This union allowed the sun to be recharged by Osiris's regenerative power, enabling it to arise anew each morning, symbolizing the renewal and eternal cycle of life. Not to be confused with Khepri crawling into Ra and bringing him back to life. Possibly a different version of the myth. When Greek and Rome took control of Egypt, they introduced their own gods into the Egyptian religious system through the process of syncretism. One of the most notable examples was Serapis, created by the Ptolemaic rulers. He was a hybrid deity that combined the aspects of Osiris and the Egyptian bull god Apis with the Greek gods like Zeus, Hades, and Asclepius. Serapis was depicted as a Greek-looking man with beard and curls. He also carried symbols of fertility and prosperity, such as the grain basket on his head. This blending was intended to make Egyptian religion more understandable and acceptable to Greek and Roman populations. Under Greek rule, Osiris's image changed significantly. He was merged with the Apis bull to create Serapis and adopted a Greek artistic style. His depiction included a full beard, flowing hair, and a modius, a grain basket, on his head, making him resemble Greek gods like Zeus or Hades more than his earlier Egyptian forms. Later, a merger with Dionysus emphasized his association with wine, festivities, and revelry. Art from this period shows him with Greek symbols such as ivy and grapes, blended with subtle elements of Egyptian royal iconography, merging the traditions of both cultures. To understand the relationship between the different ancient Egyptian religious practices, it helps to compare the cult of Serapis and the Book of the Dead. These traditions represent different approaches to the afterlife. One was designated for public and temple use in the Greco-Roman world, while the other served as a private guide for the individual souls on their journey to the afterlife. One guess which one's which. No, I'm not telling you. The cult of Serapis was a strategic marketing effort by Ptolemaic rulers to unify Greek and Egyptian followers through a common deity. A central figure of Serapis is the modius, the basket placed on his head instead of an Egyptian crown, which represents control over Egypt's grain and symbolized fertility and abundance, exactly how the Greeks and later Romans wanted to show that they controlled Egypt. Additionally, Cerberus, the three-headed dog of Greek mythology that guards the underworld, links Serapis directly to Hades and underscores his role as ruler of the dead. Serapis was also often depicted with a large snake, Agathodaimon, which represents good luck and served as a protective spirit for Alexandria. To appeal more to Greek audiences, Serapis was portrayed with characteristics similar to those of Zeus, including the beard, curly hair, and regal robes, moving away from the mummy-like Egyptian imagery. This also led to his political role. Ptolemy I Soter, a Macedonian general who became the ruler of Egypt around 305 BCE, created Serapis not just as a religious figure, but as a tool of political unity. His goal was to bring together the diverse religious communities within Egypt, native Egyptians and Greek settlers, under a common deity. Worship of this new god helped foster a sense of shared identity and stability in a time of cultural division. Serapis was a hybrid and was depicted as a Greek king, but still bore features of Egyptian underworld deities. In Alexandria, working Serapis helped people feel a spiritual connection to their city, while also providing comfort to Egyptians by linking Serapis to their well-known Osiris Apis tradition. Temples dedicated to Serapis, like the Serapeum in Memphis, displayed a mixture of Greek and Egyptian architectural styles, featuring statues of Greek philosophers alongside Egyptian sphinxes. However, not everyone accepted Serapis. Many Egyptians saw him as a fake or a replacement for their traditional gods, while Greeks appreciated him as a symbol of Ptolemaic power. In the end, Serapis' main role was successful, and he was less about inspiring devotion and more about keeping society stable in a divided time. But Serapis wasn't the only Greek invention combined with Osiris. Herodotus, the Greek historian, noted that Osiris was essentially the Greek god Dionysus, both gods of fertility, wine, and rebirth, which was kind of added later in terms of the wine part, who suffered death and dismemberment before being revived. Similarly, the Romans linked Osiris with Pluto or Hades due to the role as ruler of the underworld. These identifications helped the Greeks and Romans understand Osiris' functions within their own religious frameworks, creating a bridge between Egyptian and Western mythologies. Estet, or Isis, in Greek and Roman times, was portrayed as the universal goddess, having absorbed traits from many other deities. She was often called Isis Myrianimos, meaning myriad names, or the goddess of 10,000 names, highlighting her widespread worship across different cultures. By the height of the Roman Empire, Isis was seen as the divine figure embodying all gods and goddesses, a concept that made her a symbol of universal motherhood and divine power. Before she was widely worshipped outside of Egypt, Isis had already adopted traits from earlier Egyptian goddesses. She took over Hathor's symbols of motherhood and the headdress of her cow horns, emphasizing her maternal role. She also incorporated aspects of Sopdet, Sothis, representing the star Sirius, whose rising signaled the annual Nile flood, linking her to cycles of nature and fertility. She is often also shown as having the wings of a kite, or later Mechbet, the vulture. Followers believe that she embodied all of the powers traditionally associated with feminine divinity, such as nurturing, caring, and creating life. In this way, Isis now became a symbol of divine femininity and universal protection throughout the ancient world. Isis' connection to Greek goddesses was strong. She was frequently associated with Demeter, the goddess of agriculture and harvest, reflecting themes of fertility and rebirth similar to those of Persephone, another mythical counterpart. She was also linked with Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, sometimes depicted in the nude or in elegant Roman-style attire. Additionally, Isis was compared to Persephone because of her role in death and resurrection, and she took on the qualities of Hera, queen of the gods, the goddess of marriage, and Artemis, the moon goddess and protector of animals. The Romans associate Isis with their own deities such as Venus, goddess of love, basically Aphrodite, and Fortuna, the goddess of luck and fate. As Isis Venus, she represented love and beauty, while as Isis Fortuna, or Isis Taishe, she symbolized good fortune and destiny, often depicted with symbols like a rudder and a cornucopia. She was also identified with Ceres, the goddess of grain and provider of sustenance, mirroring her Egyptian origins. For other regional goddesses, in regions like the Levant, Isis was identified with Astarte, a goddess of war and fertility. In Rome, her cults sometimes overlapped with that Cybele, a goddess known as the Great Mother of Phrygia, illustrating how her worship spread and intersected with different cultural traditions. For many centuries, the Mediterranean region was filled with statues depicting Isis
holding and nursing the infant Horus, also known as Hippocrates. When early Christians began to portray the Virgin Mary, they had no established visual tradition of their own. To communicate their new faith, they naturally adopted existing artistic symbols, specifically the pose of a seated mother with a child on her lap to symbolize Mary and Jesus. This pose, where the mother supports her breast or the child's head, was taken directly from the images of Isis. Similarly, Isis was often shown sitting on a throne, an image that early Christian art adapted for Mary, who was frequently depicted as the Sede Sapiente, or throne of wisdom. In this role, Mary literally served as the seat for the Christ child, reinforcing her importance and connection to divine authority, also hearkening all the way back to Isis's early forms as a throne, like the hieroglyphic throne headdress that she wore. The shift from Isis lactans, the image of Isis nursing, to the Christian Madonna is one of the most well-known examples of how religious imagery can change while maintaining its core symbolism. As the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, familiar symbols of the Divine Mother were adapted to fit the new religious context. As the worship of Isis declined and Christianity grew, many of the goddess's most meaningful titles and symbols were transferred to Mary to make her more relatable to new followers. The title Stella Maris, meaning Star of the Sea, was associated with Isis, who was seen as a protector over sailors. This title was later adopted for Mary, emphasizing her spiritual guidance over those at sea. Another shared title was Queen of Heaven, where both Isis and Mary were celebrated as the highest female figures overseeing the universe. Additionally, in later Christian imagery, Mary was often depicted as standing on a crescent moon, a symbol closely tied to Isis in her Greco-Roman lunar form. These shared titles and symbols helped to bridge the gap between the ancient goddess and the Christian mother figure. The connection between Isis and Mary is particularly evident in Egypt. In Coptic Christian communities, the early Christian figurines of a nursing mother closely resembled representations of Isis nursing Horus. Artifacts found in the Coptic Museum in Cairo show a gradual shift where traditional Egyptian symbols, like the sun disk often associated with Isis, were replaced by Christian symbols such as the halo, illustrating another smooth cultural transition. The influence of Isis extended beyond art to physical spaces of worship. The Temple of Philae, which was one of the last places dedicated to Isis worship, was converted into a Christian church dedicated to the Virgin Mary in the 6th century. The transformation was viewed as a fulfillment of replacing the old mother, Isis, with the new mother, Mary, symbolizing the continuity and adaptation of religious traditions over time. Personally, I'm just glad it was saved. From the ancient to modern heroes protecting the vulnerable to the Renaissance masters capturing innocence on a canvas, themes we explore every week are more relevant than ever. UNICEF is doing work right now, providing healthcare, education, and emergency relief to children living through history's toughest chapters. I'll keep the stories flowing for all of you, but we need to keep the donations coming. Let's prove that history and art nerds have the biggest hearts. In more recent and modern day interpretations, the novel Dune by Frank Herbert. On Reddit, I know such a good place to find research, the user SadWatercress7930 addressed the question, quote, "Why does Herbert call Isis a demon goddess?" He specifically links it to the language they were speaking, which is close to Middle Egyptian. Isis was never a demon, unquote. The user does the research, finding that the ancient Greek term daemon means spirit or divine entity, likely deriving from the Greek verb diasthai, meaning to divide or distribute. As mentioned before, Isis is first documented in the 5th dynasty, so it's possible
that in addition to reviving Osiris and creating Horus to restore balance, she might have had an earlier role related to distribution, perhaps of intangible elements such as magic, life, or luck. Her hieroglyphic name, which features the throne symbol, instead could imply that division or distribution represents authority, although this obviously remains speculative. Some ancient cults might have regarded her as a demon goddess before Christianity associated demon with negative connotations. The user speculated that Herbert probably saw her in this way unconsciously, but given the limited records from over 4,000 years ago while he was writing this remains completely open to interpretation. The word demon here is used to invoke Isis's original role in helping people transition to the afterlife, similar to how Osiris's story shows the resurrection or restoration of the body. However, since the story is set thousands of years in the future of today, the understanding of the past beliefs has changed. Calling her a demon goddess might not fit with the current way we see the Isis myth. Still, the author makes it clear that in the Dune universe, there is a cult of Isis followers that have included demonic elements, probably related to her traditional role in guiding souls to the afterlife. And addressing the elephant in the room, starting in 1999 and active until present, the group's name of ISIS has evolved alongside its territorial claims, often leading to confusion regarding its various acronyms. ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, and ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. The key difference stemming from the translation of the Arabic term al-Sham, which can either refer to Syria specifically or to the broader Levant region. So, thank goodness, and really, it has nothing to do with the goddess Isis. Finally, getting to Stargate SG-1. In episode 14 of season 4, The Curse, is when we're introduced to both of the symbiotes, the dead husk of Isis and Osiris, who takes control of Dr. Daniel Jackson's love interest and ex-girlfriend, Dr. Sarah Gardner, played by Anna Louise Plowman. According to the Stargate Wiki, the context of the Stargate SG-1 TV series, Isis and Osiris, were a pair of Goa'uld king and queen whose history is tied to ancient Egyptian mythology and a failed archaeological expedition. The ancient Egyptian history and imprisonment goes as follows. Osiris rose to power as a system lord during the Second Goa'uld dynasty and was recognized as Egypt's first pharaoh alongside his consort Isis. In Egyptian mythology, they were once trapped in stasis chambers, canopic jars, by the Goa'uld Seth. This story happened around 9000 BCE when Seth betrayed them during a rebellion against the supreme system lord Ra. As punishment, Ra removed them from their hosts and sealed their symbiotes in canopic jars designed for eternal stasis. These jars remained hidden until 1931 when the Stewart expedition discovered them. Unfortunately, the expedition ship sank before they could retrieve or analyze artifacts. In 2000, when the artifacts were finally recovered and transported, it was discovered that the seal of the Isis jar had been broken during transport from its original shipwreck. This breach of the seal caused the symbiote's loss of preserved state, leading to its death. An autopsy was subsequently carried out on her remains at Stargate Command by Dr. Janet Fraser. Although Isis did not survive, her companion Osiris remained alive because his jar was still properly sealed. Later that year, archaeologist Sarah Gardner unintentionally opened the Osiris jar while examining artifacts from the shipwreck site. This accidental break allowed the symbiote to transfer itself and select her as a new host. To conceal the change, they dressed in garments originally intended for Isis, thereby aligning with the new host's female appearance.
The other episodes in which Osiris appears are in Season 5, Episodes 15, Summit, and 16, Last Stand, then skipping forward to Season 7, Episode 15, Chimera. After killing her mentor and nearly fatally injuring Daniel Jackson, Osiris escaped from Earth on a hidden Teltec spacecraft. They then rose to become an underlord under the revived Anubis, serving as his chief representative at the System Lord Summit, where she worked to secure his reinstatement, which ended up working, especially after Daniel snuck aboard and the System Lords got attacked. Osiris took command of parts of Anubis' fleet, notably capturing the Asgard warrior Thor and employing psychological warfare tactics against SG-1. This kind of flips the whole mythos on its head because Osiris was originally above Anubis. Anyway, in 2003, they returned to Earth with the aim of probing Daniel Jackson's mind to locate the fabled lost city of the ancients. However, SG-1 anticipated her move, set a trap, and successfully captured her. During her capture, the Osiris symbiote was successfully extracted from Sarah Gardner. Although she survived the procedure, the symbiote was either destroyed during removal or executed shortly afterwards due to the danger it posed, because the symbiote never appears again, and really neither does Sarah Gardner. After being possessed, I probably wouldn't either. The personality of another megalomaniac, based on the available records from the show, Osiris is depicted as a pragmatic, highly arrogant Goa'uld with a complex identity during his modern resurgence. His approach, or rather, its approach, was grounded in practicality and careful planning, setting them apart from more stubborn system lords. For example, it acknowledged Anubis' superior strength and chose to serve him as their underlord, demonstrating a willingness to forge calculated alliances rather than stubbornly opposing stronger enemies. Moreover, Osiris was renowned for its diplomatic tactics. In the show's ancient court sources often described it as a silver-tongued diplomat. These skills allowed it to negotiate effectively, such as securing Anubis' return to power at the System Lord Summit through tact and persuasion. Its ruthless nature was also a defining trait. It showed no remorse in sacrificing its Jaffa soldiers when necessary, and was willing to use torture to extract information, as evidenced by its treatment of enemies like Daniel Jackson. But especially, Osiris' personality was characterized by a sense of grandeur. Like all Goa'uld, it was a megalomaniac who often claimed divinity, even when confronting advanced civilizations like the Asgard. Although it had a female host, Sarah Gardner, Osiris retained a male identity in his thoughts and self-view. To enhance his host's image, he chose a flamboyant wardrobe, highlighting his showy nature. His arrogance often led him to underestimate opponents, including the humans of the Tari, a common flaw among Goa'uld leaders. Osiris' personal obsessions and tendencies showcased his complex personality. He was especially fixated on Daniel Jackson, motivated by their past relationship through his host and Jackson's role in removing some of Osiris' rivals. His flamboyant, theatrical style was evident in threats and statements like his notorious promise that the rivers of the earth will run red with blood if he escaped captivity. This combination of arrogance, strategic intelligence, and personal obsession made Osiris a formidable and unpredictable leader among the Goa'uld. I only wish that he was in more episodes. Let's go back to looking at the evolution of Osiris and Isis, the mythological depictions through time. Osiris, primarily recognized as the god of the afterlife, resurrection, and fertility, and Isis, goddess of magic, his devoted wife and mother of Horus, began to take on distinct forms and importance during different periods of ancient Egyptian history. Initial myths from the Old Kingdom primarily focus on the theme of dualities such as life and death, encapsulated in the cyclical nature of Osiris' death and resurrection. The sexual union between Isis and Osiris which symbolized the conception of the pharaoh, Horus, embodies the foundational aspects of kingship and regeneration in ancient Egypt. As the Middle Kingdom emerged, the complexity of their narrative increased, including themes such as suffering, sacrifice, and the pursuit of divine justice through mythological adaptations. This complexity is echoed in the detailed representations of their stories found in the coffin text, which expanded significantly upon the earlier pyramid texts, symbolizing growing conceptual richness regarding the afterlife and the deified state of kings. Hence, during the Middle Kingdom, there was a marked increase in the attention given to Osiris and Isis, where their roles transitioned from their royal archetypes to central figures in the popular religion practiced by the masses. Not everyone could afford tombs. More people could afford coffins. Artistic representations of Osiris and Isis evolved alongside their narrative significance. In the Old Kingdom, their depictions were largely formal and hierarchical, designed primarily for tombs and religious sites, reflecting the period's austere aesthetics. By the Middle Kingdom, with the proliferation of writing and literature, artists began to imbue their works with emotional depth and personal connections, reflecting the evolving notions of the afterlife and divine interaction with humanity. Statuary and reliefs from this period depict Isis as a more intimate, nurturing mother, in contrast to earlier depictions that focus predominantly with her power as a goddess, and as more of a sideline to Osiris's resurrection. As Egypt transitioned to the New Kingdom, their narratives surrounding Osiris and Isis were further popularized, with their images becoming common in household shrines and artifacts, thus encapsulating the broader appeal of their mythology. In artworks from this time, we see a hyper-realistic approach to their portrayals, which emphasize emotional resonance. For example, the incorporation of Osiris as deceased king in a coffin, or the use of amulets depicting Isis cradling Horus, demonstrates the lived importance of these deities in the daily lives of ancient Egyptians. The enduring cultural significance of Osiris and Isis has continued to manifest through centuries. The narratives of their struggle, resurrection, love, and revenge devised a complex mythos that appealed to the human condition, making them relatable, not merely theological figures. The figure of Isis has historically been utilized to represent women's roles in society, showcasing the empowerment of female divinity and royal representation in the ancient context. This symbolic representation shifted, yet it remained rooted in the initial conceptions from their mythologies. In contemporary times, Isis and Osiris remain prominent across popular culture, literature, and neo-pagan movements, illustrating the myth's adaptability and relevance beyond their original context. These methods in which these gods are invoked or represented in modern interpretations often reflect both a desire to connect with ancient wisdom and a reclamation of cultural heritage. As such, their stories continue to evolve, merging with new contexts while also recognizing their ancient roots. Because it's me, of course I'm going high fantasy. Both Isis and Osiris feature in Dungeons & Dragons Forgotten Realms. For both gods, the history and myths are slightly altered, but in general, the changes still reflect the same spirit. In the Forgotten Realms, Isis is a carrying demigod from the Mulhorandi pantheon, embodying fertility and magic, known as the Bountiful Lady and Lady of All Love. She shares her discoveries with followers and is aligned as neutral good. Overseeing the knowledge and life domains, her symbol combines an Ankh and a star. She is called Isharia in Thay and Ishtar in Unther, often depicted as a Mulan woman dressed in white linen, wearing sandals and jewelry. Isis, just like in mythology, is the daughter of Geb and Nut, wife of Osiris, mother of Horus Ra, which is something that comes up in later mythology, and a twin sister of Nephthys. She maintains alliances with Charas and Chania keeps a cordial relationship with Mistra and opposes Sobek and Shar due to her animosity towards the Shadow Weave. This whole last part, not historically mythologically connected. Her worship centers on Moharandi's agriculture, with priestesses, mainly what they call Mulan women, trained in arcane and divine magic, who are marked by 3 circles on their foreheads. Her followers include the Sisters of Life, worshipping alongside the deities such as Anhur and Osiris, and the Shield of the Lady, spellcasters aiding adventurers. The main temple, Mystic Cornucopia, is located in the Great Vale, and celebrations such as the Green Grass and High Harvest Tide honor Isis for a successful harvest. Osiris is another central deity in the Moharandi pantheon associated with death, justice, and natural growth. Known as the Lord of Nature and the Judge of Death, he helps souls transition to the afterlife and oversees natural cycles. Typically depicted as either a mummified king or a green-skinned warrior, Osiris embodies the connection between life and death. His responsibilities include overseeing death, the dead, justice, harvest, and plant life, aligning with domains of life, grave, and nature in 5th edition D&D. His symbol features a white crown of Molrand over a crossed crook and flail. Just like Isis, the myth matches, with Osiris being the son of Geb and Nut, married to Isis and father to Horus Ra and Anubis. Where it goes off is that he is closely aligned with Kelemvor from Faerun, sharing views on the significance of death. His notable enemies include his brother Set, who murdered him long ago, and Mask, the god of thieves, who he opposes for a chaotic, deceptive nature. Now, of course, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio or nearly the same comparison, but the great power that is hiding inside these 2 divine beings is way more involved than simple evil forces. And in no way am I saying that either one of them are evil. In fact, both of them are, in the ancient Egyptian world, the epitome of goodness. But depending on the period, they have muted or more elaborated power sets. For instance, with Osiris, sure, he is a symbol of regeneration, rebirth, and renewal, but he doesn't seem to actually do much in the afterlife other than just be a judge. But that might have been because he was introduced after other afterlife gods and was just placed in charge of everything, making people do all their specific jobs. This contrasts the immutable power that Isis has, ultimate power over Ra, and hell, just being called the mistress of magic. If she wanted to, she could turn into an unstoppable force from out of a fantasy novel. Like if Galadriel had actually taken the One Ring from Frodo and become the queen, powerful and beautiful as the dawn, treacherous as the sea. But aren't we lucky that she never did? I'm talking about Isis here. Even if the Christian church had to change the goddess into the mother of God to sanitize her, they still used her as the mother of God. Luckily for us today, in terms of adaptations, people didn't stick to this version, just the mother of God sanitized version, and brought her back to her power. Unless, like in Stargate, they just killed her off and proceeded to combine their godly tropes by making Osiris female, but with more power.
I believe that's why I wasn't put off by his character compared to others. Although it was an evil version of Osiris, it was given way more personality than merely a love interest who fell into the taken over by evil, you're in there somewhere trope that his wife Sharae also shared. Osiris also experienced more internal conflict, or at least single-minded obsession, with the host almost urging the symbiote to go to Daniel because maybe deep down she believed that he could save her. Osiris and Anubis, which we will discuss, are my favorite Goa'uld, rivaling Apophis. They carry enough significance and influence in the story to actually make a difference. not like just some extant Goa'uld who are sometimes talked about maybe a little and then just dead. But while these characters are, of course, very different from the source material, I feel like Osiris shares a motive for revenge over his queen's death at the hands of humans. It's wrong, cruel, evil, and unacceptable in real life, but given he's a crazy megalomaniac alien that's been in stasis for like 10,000 years, it starts to make sense a little bit. And it's just interesting how they carry that hint of mythological revenge story, even though it's not his son doing it in this version.
The mythological depictions of Osiris and Isis offer a rich tapestry of insights into Egyptian society, reflecting changing ideologies, religious practices, and artistic expressions through different dynasties. Their evolution from distant deities to central figures in everyday people's lives demonstrates profound narrative adaptability that obviously continues to resonate today. Thank you so much for listening to Osiris and Isis, Love Never Dies.
If you liked this, please write a review, please rate it, and leave a comment. Human engagement is the best way that more people can find my podcast in the future. Head over to the website to read about and follow along with the text of this document. See all the beautiful images that I included with it and the references at the end for all my citations. I would like to make a formal apology for my pronunciation of all the Egyptian words, most of which, in case you're not aware, are written without vowels most of the time. So I'm just trying to make an educated guess, and probably some English words as well. I swear I am trying, but I am not very good at it. If you know of any corrections, or you have more information, or any questions, feel free to email me directly at detoursandarchaeology@gmail.com, or you can contact me really anywhere. If you would like to support me in any monetary way, you can join my Patreon at a higher level than the free, which it is normally, or you can head over to my Printify shop, where I have shirts, stickers, mugs, various other objects, and some of my works of art that I'm selling. And I'm also open for commissions. Just email me directly at detoursandinarchaeology@gmail.com, or hit the contact link on my website to let me know what I can do, and we can discuss options if you want anything personalized. You can also follow me on Instagram, on Blue Sky, but I recommend following this podcast and checking out their direct website. I am on the Archaeology Podcast Network, so if you are new and listening to this for the first time, welcome. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it if you've listened to all of my episodes already. All the music comes from Scott Buckley, who can be found at scottbuckley.com.au.
This will not come out on Friday the 13th. In fact, if you're listening to this, it's already passed. But it is one of my favorite days because the 13th is my favorite number. And it's also Friday. Come on, can't go wrong. Today's interesting fact is from interestingfacts.com. Michael Nordine writes, if you feel uneasy every time there's a Friday the 13th on the horizon, you got some bad news. The 13th day of the month lands slightly more frequently on a Friday than any other day of the week, making the supposedly unlucky date fairly common. The reason for this comparatively high frequency has to do with the Georgian calendar, which is based on a repeating 400-year cycle and leap years that add to the total number of days in that cycle. Including leap days, each 4-century cycle consists of 146,097 days, which is divisible by 7 with no remainder, equaling 20,871. For example, January 1st, 2000 fell on a Saturday,
meaning January 1st, 2400 will as well. Knowing this allows us to determine in advance which days of the week the 13th will fall on any given month or year. The difference in frequency is minimal. However, the 13th will fall on a Friday 688 times during the cycle that began in January 1st, 2000, compared to 687 Wednesdays and Sundays, 685 Mondays and Tuesdays, and 684 Thursdays and Saturdays. The years 2012 and 2015 both had 3 Friday the 13th, as will 2026. February, March, and November will all feature horror fans' favorite unlucky day. By the end of the decade, the 2020s as a whole will have had a total of 16 Friday the 13th. And just a little fun fact from me, I worked at the Winchester Mystery House, and while I was a tour guide there, I learned Sarah Winchester's favorite number was also 13, and she had it incorporated in a bunch of her architecture, such as the number of prisms put into a stained glass window, or the number of windows on one floor in the wing of a house. Highly recommend a visit there, San Jose, California. And that's a wrap on this segment of our marathon. We spent the last hour exploring life in the rising and falling empires, lives of gods and false gods, and so many legends of the past. But before we go, let's talk again about building something that lasts. Our donations to UNICEF today are an investment in the next generation of historians, artists, and maybe even a few future legends. Art is long, but life is often too short. Let's make sure these kids have a future worth painting. If you haven't already donated, now is the time to be the hero of your own myth. Every Medici-sized contribution, or even the price of a cup of tea, counts. Please click the link in our show notes to help restore a child's future, much like an art conservator restores a masterpiece. Thank you so much for being part of this marathon with me and with all of us. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep taking those detours. Thanks.